than the older people.
There's a whole organization in Japan that's formed called Save the Children of Fukushima. And it's to protect the children who have been exposed and are receiving ongoing exposures. Why it's happening? Early in the accident, the U.S. government, under the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission downplayed the whole accident. I think there's some important facts that should come out here. First off, Hillary Clinton reached an agreement with the Prime Minister of Japan only a few weeks after the accident that the U.S. would not push aside Japanese imports, that we would continue to support the economy, because they knew how devastating it was. Emails just came out, was it a month ago, that showed that the NRC, Nuclear Regulatory Commission of the United States, knew how bad the accident was 9 days before the people of Japan were warned and evacuated. And so the governments were playing with people's lives in an effort to maintain economies at full scale. So it's all about money. It's clearly about money. The utilities are playing a game about money, and the regulators are playing a game about money. In the U.S. and Canada, all the monitoring on the West Coast was shut down. And we have independent monitoring from different universities and different independent labs that show a tremendous amount of radiation came to the U.S. And yet our governments say, oh, we don't need to monitor anymore because there's nothing coming here. So it's...
This is disgusting.
An example is that the FDA, we get millions of fish a year, and the FDA has sampled 186 of them for radiation. We're just not testing. It's on the, if you don't know, it's not there. It's a very comfortable place to be. What you don't know can't hurt you.
It's like the ostrich putting your head in the sand and you don't see it, so there's no threat there.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing this in there's a concerted effort within the nuclear community, and that's the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the Japanese industry, the IAEA, and the people that produce nuclear power. Are deliberately downplaying the significance of low-level radiation. There's a worldwide push in those organizations that are controlled by the money that builds nuclear power plants to downplay the significance of the radiation that the people in Fukushima are receiving. The Frontline did a piece 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, Frontline did a piece. And they had a Japanese scientist on saying that the people in Fukushima could get 20 millisieverts, and that was no problem. And the Frontline guy just bought it. It was Miles O'Brien. He just bought it and never questioned it.
When you say that people could get 20 millisieverts, it means that you could go in to the area and be exposed to 20 millisieverts, and you would have no health problem.
Right. Right, and that would come from the ground.
What does 20 millisieverts represent?
Well, to kick it over to the American system of REM, it's 2 REM, which is the equivalent of several pretty severe X-rays to your brain or something like that. And what we did on the site to try to one, it was just patently wrong, but we went to published reports that the National Academy of Science had out, and we showed that in fact the population in those zones, for every year they were in there, 1 out of every 500 people would get a cancer from that exposure that this guy said was no big deal. But it's more important than that. That was a blended average of old people and young people. And of course, old people are going to die from something else before they ever get a cancer. But children, and especially young girls, are 5 times more susceptible, and even 10 times more when they're very, very young. So the number really works out that for the kids in Fukushima, the chances of a cancer for every year they're in that town are 1 out of 20 to 1 out of 100. So essentially in one class of 20 kids, one of those kids is going to get a cancer. And there's a lot of those. That never came up, and it used industry data. So that's an example of how the American press isn't asking the probing questions of the industry, and the industry is just overwhelming them with misinformation.
And at the same time, a whole country such as Germany has reacted to the Fukushima disaster by putting in place the plan to completely end nuclear power reactors in their country. And also France, there has been unrest and demonstrations in France, which is a premier nuclear power country. And also in Italy, they're going to phase out nuclear power reactors. But why the United States is far behind? And here in Vermont, where we have Energy Vermont Yankee, now pushing the Vermont Public Service Board to extend the license for 20 more years, just to rubber stamp what the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has put in place for us. It seems as though everything is going on just as before, and as you say, it's terrible because we're not getting the accurate information, and that even on a supposedly expose program such as Frontline, where they have the scientists saying that this dosage of 20 millisieverts is okay for children and for others. It's just it's shocking. It is shocking and distressing.
Margaret, when I was on your program a few years ago, we talked about the German study that showed the increase in cancers surrounding plants in Germany. It was a German study.
Right.
And the doctor, Winfried Eisenberg, came to Fletcher Allen and spoke, and I got to hear him and meet him. And now, just 2 weeks ago, the French came out with a study in France that substantiates the German study, that shows that operating nuclear power plants give off constant emissions, and those emissions do cause cancers to the population living around the plant. And
especially early childhood cancers.
Yes.
And it's the ratio increases as the child is moved closer to the nuclear power reactor. And that brings to mind Dr. Helen Caldicott's editorial in the New York Times in maybe April of 2011, after Fukushima, and she set forth the case against the radiation, poisoning us from the nuclear reactors. And their answer was, somebody published a study called the Oxford Study and about radiation, and studying it in England. And their conclusion was that only children of rich people will get leukemia faster than people who are living near a nuclear power plant. That was the conclusion of that stupid study called the Oxford Study.
It was a bogus.
It was a bogus theory.
There's another two things real quick. Steve Wing, Dr. Steve Wing, who I really respect his work. He had a study that showed that there clearly were cancers after 3 Mile Island, that the authorities used techniques to mask the cancers. But he just published another study, and it looks at the studies like the KIC study in Germany and the French study, and he basically says we're not getting all the data correctly, even in those, because we're looking at this broad population, and really the best way to look for cancers in a population is to look at the young people, not the broad population, because old people are going to die of something else before they're ever exposed. So Wing's got a study out, it's only a week or two old, that talks about if you're going to do it right, here's how you should structure a study. And in fact, all these numbers, like the KIC study and the thing in France, will in fact have higher numbers than the techniques that they're using. But the other thing is that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission clearly has not learned the lesson. Just yesterday, they published a study that if there's a severe accident in America, that everything will work just fine afterward, and the people will behave appropriately, and all the backup systems will work, and the chances of an American dying of a cancer from a nuclear accident are 1 in a billion. Now, there's not that many Americans, so they're basically saying if there's a nuclear accident in America, no one needs to worry. And that's just yesterday.
And the data produced by Dr. Wing and another recent study that Dr. Wing didn't do, but I can't remember the name of the scientist, did in post 3 Mile Island accident. There are a lot of cancers and a lot of deaths. And as they're doing this, they're not talking about what's happening in terms of other health effects, like the cesium that's absorbed, that's released and absorbed into children, that in Chernobyl, that caused a thing called Chernobyl heart, where the cesium is absorbed into the muscle in the body, just like potassium. And so the body sucks it right up, and it causes malformed hearts, and kids are quite ill and dying. And, you know, so there's many, many other illnesses that have been tracked to radiation exposures that are not even being considered in these studies. They're just talking about cancers.
And I'm afraid that the Japanese government and the Japanese medical establishment are going to try their very best to hide the numbers coming out of Fukushima Prefecture. You know, they'll already we've seen where national death rates have been published in Japan. They're not available in the areas near the Fukushima reactor. For whatever reason, that data is not available for the last 9 months. Why is that?
Yeah.
So I'm afraid that the medical community is going to just follow the Japanese government and try to downplay the significance of this. But this time we have the internet, and that's the difference. You know, our site and others have been really instrumental in finding ways for that information to get out that don't rely on mainstream media and that don't rely on governmental organizations. And that's what Maggie has done so well on, and that's what makes our site special, I think, is that we try to crowdsource.
We try to get information. We're working with a number of scientists across the world, and so there's an international group. One of the groups that we're working with, for example, on the radiation testing he was talking about before, is safecast.org. And Safecast is a crowdsourced team, and that team is amazing. They've taught all different normal people how to test for radiation and how to do appropriate samples, and scientists are working with them. And then they've charted all these measurements on maps. And you can go and see their website. And in the same way, Fairwinds has produced 50 videos talking about the different nuclear power plant issues across the country, and that's at fairwinds.com. And we will, in a few minutes, show a video for your viewers.
Okay.
And, you know, I know that you had originally planned for only a few more minutes, so I don't know if you want to continue that schedule.
I think that if you can say that we have touched upon major issues for the moment, which I find so disturbing, I can't even articulate how disturbed I feel about the things that you have told me and are public now. And the thing is that this whole nuclear power reactor industry is chugging along. There are new power reactors that are planned in Georgia and in South Carolina, those two states, and and again, we have to be aware that it is taxpayers' money that is doing this, and all of the political talk about too much government and everything like that. We the people are the government. We are the people who are funding all the research and development, including the research and development that Bill Gates is doing for the new uranium nuclear power reactors that he's handing over to China.
Yeah, that's a terribly frightening issue, and I'm so disappointed in Bill Gates.
Yes, Bill Gates, we are very disappointed in you, and it's a horrible thing, because you can have all of the commercials in the world, and they are commercials, about how you're giving free books away to people. But meanwhile, you're promoting this horrendous industry, and the uranium mining in Australia, which was just opened up recently again. And Maggie, speak about the Bill Gates thing for just a few minutes. And
well, Arnie has done a tremendous job, and it would be enough for a whole show if you'd like us to come back.
Okay, I hope
to
you
talk
come back.
about the new reactors. And he's done a lot on the AP1000 and other designs and their lack of safety.